let's get into this, shall we? We're hearing that New Zealand might be for sale to the highest bidder should National become government. This morning on breakfast, there was a conversation, which we'll start in a minute. There it goes.
New transport policy's got a lot of attention, but maybe not for the right reasons.
No, Anna, not for the right reasons.
That's it. That's the whole story.
That's it. Very not concise. For the right reasons. So, thoughts, Chewy, around it not being for the right reasons?
Bad.
Bad.
If they're not for the right reasons, that sounds bad.
Got to be for the right reason and not for the wrong reason. That's what I always think, Chewy. If it's for the wrong reason, bad.
National's new transport policy's got a lot of attention, but maybe not for the right reasons. It's been priced up at $24 billion. Sounds like a lot of dough. But there's a question mark over where a missing chunk of money, nearly $10 billion, is going to come from. National leader Christopher Luxon joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Luxon. $9.25 billion of private funding. Where will that come from?
Well, look, there's a lot of pension funds, there's a lot of sovereign wealth funds that want to invest in infrastructure for long-term investment returns. What we're saying, Anna, is look, we have a fantastic country. We want to be a leading small advanced economy in the world. That means we've got to have a modern and reliable infrastructure and roading network. And the way that we can do that, or part of the way we can do that, is actually using private capital and alternative funding mechanisms. And that just means we get to do more infrastructure sooner. And we also make sure that we don't give the taxpayer a huge amount of debt to deal with.
So the problem with that, obviously, is transmission gully is the example we've been talking about, and the private-public partnership, it's being said, led to huge delays. So there's no guarantees that there's doing this. And, of course, he's talking about the public not having more debt. How are we paying for it? If it's being put on mum and dad's credit card rather than our own credit card, so they technically carry the debt, but how's that debt being paid? How's it any different? Just some questions, just some thoughts.
Deal with.
It means we would rely on perhaps other countries, for instance, like China, to pay for the road.
Well, it means, there's a lot of pension schemes around the world. If you think about, sovereign wealth funds, a bit like our KiwiSaver account and other pension funds, there's $11 trillion that's around the world just in sovereign wealth funds, about $52 trillion actually just in pension funds in the top 22 countries in the world. They all want to make long-term investments in order to be able to give those returns to their investors. And so they want to partner with firms here in New Zealand and actually build and develop infrastructure. That's how things actually get done in other parts of the world. And for too long in this country, we've run it like it's 1975. We've got to modernise and actually imagine what kind of country we want to have in 2050 and beyond. So what we're saying is National's the government that gets infrastructure built, and that's what we're going to do. Would
you take money from China under its Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. New Zealand's the country, same size of Great Britain and Japan. We have 5 million people in it. A strong and resilient roading network will be absolutely critical to our future.
So very clear there, Chewy. Just need to, I know people heard it, and I'm not trying to patronise or mansplain, but will you take money from China? Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Now, probably fair at this point, and we'll get to this when we're finished hearing Mr. Luxon accuse Anna Burns-Francis of being xenophobic, as to what that actually means. So we'll have a look at Chinese money in other countries around the Pacific and how that's worked for them and what China expects of it when money gets spent on other countries' infrastructure.
And whether you're on an EV or whether you're on a hydrogen truck, you're going to need very good and resilient roads.
So how would you do the deal? Would you accept Chinese workers coming in to build the road?
Let's not answer that question.
Well, what we're going to do is three things. We actually need to make sure that we have what's called a 30-year pipeline that's going to be delivered through Infrastructure New Zealand. Secondly, we're going to do city and regional deals with local government, agreeing the critical bits of infrastructure and lock that up for 10 years so that projects don't get turned off, turned on again. And then we're going to make sure that we have something called the National Infrastructure Agency, and they will really work with partners to develop the right sort of financing and the right sort of partner for the right sort of project. And so that's those international companies or international funds that want to actually make investments in infrastructure will interface with that agency of government to be able to put.
We're going to talk a little bit later on about how much New Zealanders trust Christopher Luxon, as well as how much they trust Christopher Hipkins, because that's the poll results that came out. Just an example of answer the fucking question. Like, answer the fucking question. You get asked a question, the first thing you do is completely ignore it and talk out the other side of your mouth. I just wonder if that's one of the reasons that the majority of New Zealanders do not trust this man. I just wonder. Just a thought.
Put that program together.
You've just said, yes, you would accept money from China. Would you accept their workers coming in to build the road?
Again, that'll be a decision for the National Infrastructure Agency to make sure that they find the right part.
So it went from I won't answer the question to I don't want to answer that question.
For the right project. And that's what we're more interested in, is actually the funding and the financing and the partnership that would work with local firms actually to deliver new roads. Here's a good example. State Highway 29, which is between Tauranga and Hamilton, isn't scheduled to be delivered until 2048 in New Zealand under the current funding mechanisms. That's an example of a road that we could do in a public-private partnership, actually get built quicker and actually improve Kiwis' daily lives and open up tens of thousands of new houses along the way as well. And that's why we need to sort of have some vision and some aspiration and think about what kind of country we want to have. And I want to make sure we've got a leading small advanced economy in the world.
And they're all great points, but I just want to get right back to the point that if we are going to do deals with other countries, that they often expect something in return for it. So that's migration, or we rack up a whole lot of debt. So these all have flow-on effects. I know you're saying...
Now, remember what she's just said. She said she's basically saying a common response is either these other countries want interest paid, or they want to be able to, the people who are working here be able to settle here. That's the two examples she's given. Mr. Luxon thinks those two thoughts, which are examples from other countries, is pretty xenophobic.
Saying someone else will make the decision, but have you thought about it, whether you would accept an influx of migrants to come and build that road, and presumably they would therefore expect that they could build a new life for themselves in New Zealand at the same time?
It's not really going to be about that, Anna, because we're going to build a workforce here in New Zealand and make sure that we've got a good pipeline of projects so that actually companies can actually plan for that. The problem that we have in New Zealand, because there is no future clarity about what projects need to get built in the country over the coming decades, is that firms actually don't keep their workforce in place. They come into New Zealand, build a single project and then leave again. If they know there is a rolling program of work and a rolling set of projects, they build a workforce locally in order to be able to deliver those projects. And so that's really what this is.
Which, of course, you wonder the question with unemployment being so low, where is that local workforce coming from? Out of interest, just purely out of interest?
I know.
Where?
It's coming from China.
No, local. Because you're saying you build a local.
Yeah, China.
But
that would come from China.
But that doesn't make sense. That would be a mistruth.
It would be. China is not going to give us billions of dollars, trillions of dollars for all of these infrastructure projects out of the goodness of their heart. It does not happen. It has not happened. It will not happen. Christopher Luxon was talking about this glorious bitumen paved future that we have in 2050. It's just insane. Like, isn't there also dangerous?
Isn't there also the really interesting point that the party that we're looking at on screen right now, who's constantly using words like various isms, socialism, fascism, communism
by
from the other side, are the ones that seem to be wanting to work with the Communist Party to bring their money into this country. So Labour are the Communist Party in New Zealand, yet National want the communists' money from China. It's a strange juxtaposition there, wouldn't you say, Chewy? Kind of weird, that.
They also had they literally had an MP who worked for Chinese intelligence. Like this is like, we're through the looking glass here, people. Connect the dots. Right. It's real conspiracy stuff, but it's there.
We'll let them continue to connect the dots, shall we? Maybe Anna Burns-Francis will for us.
And I just say to you, all around the world, there are fantastic examples of these alternatives being used. Montreal is a great example. There is a new rapid transit system that started just 5 or 6 years ago that is opening this year. We've got a government, on the other hand, that's been talking about light rail now for 6 years, plans to spend $30 billion on it, and not a metre of track has been laid. So, there are there's a different way of doing it, and I want us to actually get things done in this country, and I want to build a really modern, resilient, future-focused country, and a big part of that is upgrading our infrastructure.
By focusing on ideas.
As a party, you're already complaining that we've got potholes and you want to fix them within 24 hours, and we don't have the workers to do it, and we don't have the money to do it. So if you're going to do it, you're going to need to bring in workers. And China's history, for example, in the Pacific, is that they bring in a workforce to do it, or that the country gets leveraged up with debt to do it. And I'm just wondering why you can't fill in the holes in those arguments.
Well, that's not going to happen, Anna. What I'm saying to you, that is not going to happen. That's quite a xenophobic sort of response and a pretty simplistic response, to be honest.
But he also said, right, he's just told her that's not going to happen, but he also said when she asked the question the first time, a different department will make that decision. So which is it? Is the other department going to make that decision, or is that not going to happen? It's almost like he's saying the opposing thing that he said 3 minutes ago, Chewy. Kind of a little bit like that, maybe.
Honest with you, when you understand how infrastructure is built all around the world, Canadian pension plans, Australian pension plans are the major investors in infrastructure that we want to be able to tap into as sources of capital, so they can do long-term infrastructure development and get long-term returns for their members and their investors. But equally, New Zealand gets infrastructure built quicker, and actually, frankly, we don't get loaded up with more debt.
Have you approached the Canadian fund to see if they're interested?
I can tell you there is lots of money out there in the world.
Have you approached the Canadian fund to see if they're interested? You've just named them, and we know that China has a Belt and Road Initiative. So have you approached anyone else to see if they're interested?
This is interesting.
I can tell you, Anna, there is so much money, and there are so many funds that want to come and invest in New Zealand. And there's lots of them that have reached out to other partners in New Zealand, and also I've spoken to directly. And essentially what they're saying is it's very difficult to do business in New Zealand. It's very difficult to do business in New Zealand because we have a restrictive foreign direct investment process here. We're one of the most restrictive countries in the OECD for foreign capital to come in and make those investments, whether it's in renewable energy. If you think about actually wind farms and solar farms that we want to be able to do to double the amount of electricity, whether it's investing in roads and our network or investing in public transport options, there's a huge opportunity for New Zealand. I'm just saying to you really clearly, we are going to build a country for the 2050s and beyond. That means we are going to be a leading small advanced economy in the world. That means we've got to have some ambition, some aspiration, and we need modern, reliable infrastructure alongside some other things, as you and I've talked about before. We need a world-class education system. We need a lot more investment in science and technology. We need to make sure it's a friendly environment for business, and we need strong international connections. Those 5 things will drive greater prosperity for all New Zealanders, and infrastructure is a key part of that.
You just said you'd spoken to some investment partners who might be interested. Who are they?
Get him.
Again, lots of funds around the world, investment funds actually have been interested in coming in to talk to New Zealand. Just name one that you've had a conversation with. I'm not going to do that, Anna. I'm just telling you there is lots of investment in the investment community. There is lots of opportunity for even New Zealand Super Fund wants to get involved in some of that infrastructure, other funds as well. So that's not going to be the problem. There is a big opportunity for us to actually say, let's lay up a plan for the next 20 to 30 years and let's go to work and actually get some things done in this country.
All right. So there's the message, believe it if you will.
Good Lord.
It's quite important, though, for us, before we move away from this, Chewy, just to have a look at Chinese money in other countries that have been doing this. So this is from a Canterbury academic. Her name is Anne-Marie Brady, and I looked her up. She's like a Chinese political strategist and expert academic in that area. So a few things, right? This is just what happens with Chinese money working on infrastructure, historically speaking, in other parts of the world. So from Kiribati to Vanuatu to French Polynesia, China has repeatedly tried to gain access to military significant airports and ports, all in the name of the BRI, which is the roading initiative. Beijing has established military cooperation relations with Fiji, Papua New Guinea and Tonga, and provided police support to Vanuatu and Solomon Islands, frequently in combination with humanitarian aid activities. Just this week, China and the Solomon Islands signed a security agreement despite the protestations of the Australian and US governments. China is rolling out the digital Silk Road in the Pacific, using its Pacific embassies to set up ground stations for its Baidu, I'll call it, satellite navigation system. So what they're doing is they're getting in, they're helping build roads, they're charging for their roads, they're charging them interest on their roads, and then when they're in the country, they're setting up some of their own infrastructure for China. Keep going. Meanwhile, China makes use of commercial operations for Baidu-equipped reference stations in the Pacific. Ground stations and reference stations work together to provide centimetre-level accuracy for satellites. Baidu is China's GPS equivalent and is now on par with it, if not better than GPS. Like GPS, it's military technology crucial for missile targeting and timing. The CCP's political interference and grey zone activities aim to co-opt Oceania political and economic elites and to access strategic information sites and resources in the Southwest Pacific. The establishment of military installations in Oceania could substantially alter the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. It could cut off the Pacific Island nations, Australia and New Zealand, from the US. I think what they're meaning is literally a line. You think about going up through the Pacific, a literal line could literally cut off this part of the Pacific from the US and other partners, turning the region into a China-dominated vassal zone. China offers assistance with several projects, but, have we heard this before? Assistance, like with, say, roading. Assistance with development projects, but unlike most donors, the loan must be paid back with interest. The Cook Islands, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and Vanuatu all have crippling levels of debt to China. Pacific Island leaders tend to have a strong sense of history. Few would welcome dependency on China or the Pacific turning into a Sinocentric order. Yet a degree of reactivity towards calls for vigilance about the CCP's malign activities is usually couched in anti-European, anti-colonial rhetoric. Given the continued presence of historic colonial powers in the region, it's been easy for some to conflate concern about the real dangers of CCP political interference and grey zone activities when expressed by Western actors with neo-colonialism and calls of whataboutism. So on one level they're saying, basically what they're saying is New Zealand and Australia, if you don't step up to help Kiribati, then why the hell shouldn't they go to China? Which on one level you kind of go, yeah, New Zealand and Australia stand up. On the other level, China's not just going, we'll help you with your roads. They're doing it for financial gain, which I guess on one level is fine. That's what a business investor interests are. But on the second thing, when they get access to the country and the infrastructure, they're planting things, military-grade technology that will help them should there be a World War III. I'm conflating a little bit, but help them should they need access to pinpoint, centimetre point precision accuracy when it comes to like GPS systems and, I don't know, when you got to launch something in a certain direction, Shuey. So that's what China has bought to other countries that's helped. The potential future prime minister of this country is saying, absolutely, we'll take their money. Reporter says, what do they want for it? And he goes, that's xenophobic. Yep. There's my case, Chewy.
It's incredibly short-sighted, and like I've said this a couple of times about national and just our political parties in general, right? Is we tend to go for the sugar hit. We tend to go for like, well, we're going to be here for 3-4 years. Maybe we'll get a second term. We're going to do stuff quick. And when we're dealing with a country like China that traditionally thinks in very long term.
Yeah.
Right. They think in decades of development.
If not more.
Belt and Road's been banging around for near 20 years as an idea and as a concept. And that goes hand in hand with China's expansion in the Pacific. They know that as things change, you're going to need a resource. This is exactly the same reason that Japan went on all crazy during World War II, was to expand their resource base. They know that they are going directly head to head with the largest military on the planet, the largest navy in the planet. So if they can gobble up as many Pacific bases as they can, and they know that they can play on the anti-colonial sort of stuff, because the empires have fucked over the islands for hundreds of years. So that's just over. And in comes Christopher Luxon going, I hear someone's got a bag of money. I haven't really Googled what Belt and Road is and how everybody else is dealing with it. I'm sure it's fine. What do you mean Sri Lanka's bankrupt? What do you mean that there's countries in Africa that are having to give Chinese bases and mineral rights because they built them a highway? What do you mean we're now surrounded by Chinese naval bases, and now our traditional ally in military matters in the Pacific, whether we get on all the time or not is a different story, but traditionally, you know, as many have mentioned in the chat here, that, you know, we still have strong ties to the US. If we're ringed by Chinese naval bases during, let's say, a Pacific war for resources. Maybe the climate's gone haywire and China needs to move a lot of people out of unsustainable parts of China.
Yeah.
It's real, like, yeah, maybe it's a little bit Tom Clancy, but I worry about someone who has really short-term thinking and is going into this. Basically, he's going into a negotiation. He's not armed for it.
I like that comment a lot by Mr. Anderson. You can smell the yuan on his breath. For those of you who don't know, we're talking former Prime Minister of New Zealand, David Longing. I can smell the uranium on your breath in the middle of a debate he was having, I think at the Oxford Union. I can smell the uranium on your breath. It shows my age. I was actually looking for another chat because I think one of the best chats I've seen come across, which I don't think we've starred, and I apologise, is especially when it comes to this thing about talking about debt. And I can't give credit to who owns it, but someone in the chat said it. I appreciate your thoughts. This is not my thoughts first. Is it's basically being put on HP as opposed to being put on your own mortgage. And we all know how much more expensive HP is. It's still debt. It might be a small lot up front, and a big lot out the back. Whereas going on your mortgage might be a big lot out front, but it's much cheaper in the long run. So let's not stop this bullshit about there's no debt in this, as Steph says as well. So yeah, it's nonsense. The other thing, Chewy, and I know you hate it when I do this, because when we get kind of in the same camp as Winston Peters, it always makes us feel a bit dirty. But this makes for interesting reading after the poll results out tonight and what we talked about last night. Winston Peters said today, any government New Zealand First is a part of will not be taking money from China to build our vital infrastructure assets. We need to get control of our assets and our future. We should be investing in our own long-term infrastructure assets.
God damn it.
Not looking, you feel dirty, don't you? Not looking for funding from overseas in some Belt and Road project. China funded their own roads in their own country, so can we. So can and should we. So I don't know if there's any real talk about Winston being there after the election yet, but if he was and if they needed him, then I guess, mind you, we've heard before Winston wouldn't take the baubles off office, and he did. But if he's there, that could be a bottom line, and that could keep Chinese money out of New Zealand, but he's not. I don't think. I know what's going to happen is if I say he's not going to be there and he is, it'll be clipped all over the place, but my gut tells me he won't end up being there, but that's where we're at.
I mean, while Luxo Flakes was talking, I just did a quick Google on Belt and Road, just Belt and Road Initiative. In the span of a decade, China has emerged as the developing world's bank of choice, pouring hundreds of billions of dollars in loans into global infrastructure projects as part of its sprawling Belt and Road Initiative. But as its borrowers fail to pay up, China is finding that its newfound authority is coming at a price. Eager to recoup its money, Beijing is transitioning from generous investor to tough enforcer.
Wow.
Did China's Belt and Road Initiative destroy Sri Lanka? July 9th, 2022. I assume Luxon hasn't Googled this. How a Chinese-built highway drove Montenegro deep into debt. Malaysia cancels 2 big Chinese projects, fearing they will bankrupt the country. Now, everybody else seems to be taking this lesson. And Luxon's not seeing it. How can you not see this?